Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're looking at, well, more than just a memoir. It feels like a real playbook for leading big change, taken from one of the most influential CEO roles out there. We're diving into the ride of a lifetime, lessons learned from 15 years as CEO of the Walt Disney Company by Robert Iger and Joel Lovell. This book tracks Iger's whole arc, from starting out making $150 a week as a studio supervisor all the way to running Disney. So our mission today is really to pull out the practical stuff. How did he handle those huge shifts in tech, those massive deals, and the inevitable crises?
Exactly. And I think what's so useful here for you, the listener, is just how clear his approach was, the big theme. It's about getting through massive change by sticking to a core set of principles and, crucially, having this incredibly sharp strategic focus. We'll definitely dig into those principles and that famous rule of three that basically reshaped Disney.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack that Iger's operating system, you could call it.
Yeah.
He lays out 10 principles in the book, but maybe three really stand out as critical for anyone trying to lead transformation. First up, the relentless pursuit of perfection.
Right. And this wasn't something from a textbook. It was learned the hard way. He points back to his first mentor, Rooney Arledge, who just, well, refused to settle for good enough. There's this amazing story he tells. Hours before a live Frank Sinatra concert broadcast, Arledge watched the rehearsal and basically said, scrap it. More or less, everything needs redoing. Hours before going live.
Wow. That's intense. It definitely sticks with you. But here's a question, and I bet some listeners grapple with this. If you're always pushing that hard for perfection, isn't there a risk of, analysis paralysis or just burning out your team? Is that sustainable?
That's a really good point. I think what Iger learned is that the pursuit isn't quite the same as achieving perfection instantly. It's more about building a culture where making excuses for mediocrity just isn't the norm.
Yeah.
If something can be better, you put in the effort. But yeah, you're right, that pressure needs balancing. Which brings us to the next key idea, authenticity and humility.
Right. Because perfectionism without humanity, without trust, that doesn't work. And Iger faced this head on, didn't he? When he got that sudden promotion to president of ABC Entertainment, a job he says he knew precisely nothing about. He could have bluffed, right? Faked it till he made it.
But he didn't. He chose honesty. Walked into that first meeting with his new creative team and just said, I need your help. That's huge, isn't it? He got that faking authority when you don't have the specific know-how is just, well, a path to failure. Real authority, he suggests, comes from knowing yourself, admitting what you don't know, and trusting the people around you to fill those gaps. That humility actually builds the respect you need for big changes.
And that humility connects directly to integrity, doesn't it? He learned that excellence and fairness don't have to be mutually exclusive. We see this principle tested, like really tested, with the whole Roseanne situation canceling that hugely successful show immediately after her awful tweet.
Oh, absolutely. That's like a case study in crisis leadership. The show was a massive hit, making tons of money. But Iger says he never asked what the financial repercussions would be and didn't care. His focus was, do what's right. Povell said. He stood by the idea that nothing is more important than the quality and integrity of an organization's people and its product, even if it hurt commercially. That decision, costing potentially millions, probably bought Disney way more in terms of reputation and internal trust in the long run.
Okay, so if those principles are the operating system, then the strategy needed that same kind of clarity. How did he translate those values into a workable plan to actually transform Disney?
Yeah, that's exactly where the rule of three comes into play. So when Iger was making his case for the CEO job, a consultant gave him this really blunt advice. A leader can realistically only drive three main priorities. Anything more than three, and they stop being priorities. Your teams just end up scattering their energy, time, capital. It all gets wasted. So that trio became the absolute blueprint for his entire time as CEO.
Right, it forces focus, stops you from, what was the phrase used, manufacturing trombone oil.
Exactly. That was his metaphor. You waste time making trombone oil stuff nobody needs, tasks that don't actually contribute because you haven't defined what truly matters. By sticking religiously to just three, every major decision, every resource allocation had to clearly serve one of them.
Makes sense. So priority one was, naturally, high-quality branded content, pouring time and money into making stuff so good and brands so powerful that they'd stand out in that explosion of choice for consumers. And this priority, obviously, was the driver behind those huge acquisitions we'll get to.
Yep. Then, priority two, embrace technology to the fullest extent. This was about shifting the internal culture, seeing tech not just as a threat, like something to defend against, but as a massive opportunity, using it to make better products reach people in new ways. Basically, be relevant.
Okay, and that thinking directly led to maybe the boldest move of his tenure, going all in on direct-to-consumer DTC,
Yeah.
buying BAMTech to get the streaming tech. But why was that so radical? Because it meant essentially attacking Disney's own successful business lines, right? Cannibalizing them.
Totally. It's the classic innovator die scenario.
Mhm.
They knew they had to consciously give up hundreds of millions of dollars in licensing fees they were getting from partners like Netflix. They realized if they didn't control their own distribution, their own relationship with the consumer, they'd eventually become irrelevant. So Iger pushed for that short-term pain, literally losing guaranteed money to launch Disney Plus and secure the long game. That takes real conviction and priority too. Real guts.
Definitely. And priority 3, becoming a truly global company. Not just having offices everywhere, but really penetrating key, huge markets like China and India, which ultimately led to things like the massive investment in Shanghai Disneyland. It shows how a priority needs that kind of major backing.
Absolutely. And if you look at those three together, content, tech, global, they're simple to state, but he was ruthless about keeping the focus there. They became the filter for everything significant.
Okay, so these principles and priorities, they weren't just theoretical. They got stress-tested constantly in really high-stakes deals and decisions. This is where the stories get good. Iger's own career path seems to be a product of another key idea: betting on talent.
Yes, and it's important to understand the culture he came up in under Tom Murphy and Dan Burke at Capital Cities. Their philosophy was literally bet on brains, not just on resumes. They kept putting Iger into these huge roles like running ABC TV that he openly admits he knew precisely nothing about when he started.
That seems risky. Why put someone totally green in charge of something so critical?
Well, the thinking was that they valued raw ability, intelligence, and potential, more than just specific experience for that job. It was almost like a leadership pressure cooker. By throwing talented people into roles that stretched them, made them uncomfortable, they forced them to learn fast, think differently, and rely on their team, rather than just falling back on old habits or assumptions.
Interesting. And that focus on talent must have paved the way for taking big creative risks, too, like championing something as weird as Twin Peaks back in the day.
Exactly. Network TV then, as Iger saw it, was getting boring and derivative. Cable was exciting, it was taking viewers. So even though his bosses apparently hated the Twin Peaks pilot, Iger really fought for it. He argued they had to take swings like that, big creative risks, or they'd just fade away. He got them to air it. It shows that sometimes you have to push against the comfortable status quo, especially when innovation is needed.
And that respect for talent, for creative vision, seems like it was the absolute key for pulling off those monster acquisitions. Pixar, Marvel, Lucasfilm, these weren't just buying assets. They were about buying cultures, right? And it all hinged on building trust with a single controlling entity.
Absolutely critical. You're talking about Steve Jobs, George Lucas, Ike Perlmutter. These aren't typical corporate sellers. They're creators, deeply invested in their legacies. Iger understood that the only way those deals would work was by guaranteeing he'd protect the creative culture of the company he was buying.
He literally had to promise Steve Jobs, Pixar needs to be Pixar. That was the core of the deal, right? Ensuring the talent wouldn't just walk out the door.
Yeah, that culture-first approach was everything. And because he built that trust, it allowed for some remarkably candid conversations during negotiations. Like with Lucasfilm, Iger tells the story of having to tell George Lucas pretty directly that his $7.4 billion asking price was too high. His reasoning: unlike Pixar, with its deep bench of talent, Lucasfilm at that point lacked a clear film pipeline and really relied on one central creative mind, George himself.
Wow, using that kind of direct, honest critique during a negotiation, that takes serious nerve. But it ties right back to that integrity principle, doesn't it? He got the deal done partly because he was straight, respectful, but also business-minded about the value.
Exactly. And, speaking of keeping cool under pressure, that links back to the principles too. Humility, integrity, leading to a certain calmness. Remember that story from the '88 Calgary Olympics? Warm weather melts all the snow, primetime events are canceled. Chaos. Iger, who was in charge of figuring out the programming on the fly, realized his main job wasn't just fixing the schedule, it was projecting calm. He couldn't show panic. He had to, as he put it, exude as much calmness as possible and frame the disaster as just a puzzle we needed to solve right there in the moment.
That mental discipline is crucial. Okay, so let's distill this down. For you listening, the entrepreneur, the team lead, maybe someone trying to turn around a bigger ship, what are the core actionable lessons from Iger's experience?
Yeah, I think we can boil down his whole approach into maybe three key imperatives for anyone trying to lead significant change. First, lead with unwavering clarity. Really adopt that rule of three. If you aren't crystal clear about your top limited priorities, your team will waste resources. You absolutely have to stop manufacturing that trombone oil, kill the projects and tasks that don't directly serve those core goals.
Okay. Second, be your own disruption. Don't let the fear of upsetting the status quo, especially your current profitable parts, paralyze you. You have to be willing to disrupt, even cannibalize, like Iger did with the streaming move your own successful models today to win tomorrow. Because if you don't, someone else definitely will.
Precisely. And third, view integrity as a strategic weapon. Seriously.
Mhm.
Uphold clear ethical standards, prioritize fairness even when it's painful financially, like the Roseanne decision showed. Your company's reputation is fundamentally the sum of its people's actions. Maintaining that integrity isn't just nice to have. It builds essential trust, the currency you absolutely need for big deals, for internal loyalty, for everything transformative.
That was a fantastic deep dive into Robert Iger's strategic mind and the principles that fueled such huge success at Disney. If this gave you some insights, make sure you search for and subscribe to The Deep Dive wherever you get your podcasts.
And maybe one final thought to leave you with, especially if you're managing something established. If Iger was ready to ditch hundreds of millions in guaranteed Netflix money to bet on Disney's future, what successful, maybe even comfortable part of your business are you most afraid to fundamentally change or even shut down right now? Something to think about.
We'll be back soon with more transformative knowledge. Until then.
Now, that's a wrap for this episode of the Business Book Club. If you enjoyed the ride, make sure to subscribe so you'll never miss our next deep dive. Got a favorite business book you'd love us to explore? Let us know. We're always up for a good read. And hey, don't keep all these insights to yourself. Share this episode with a fellow book lover or your work buddy who's always looking to level up. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and we'll see you in the next episode.